Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of the Indie Initiative from Insider Gaming. I'm your host, Mike Straw, and I'm pleased this week to be joined from Rain Games, the studio behind our game Teslagrad 2, Aslak Helgesen. Aslak, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Teslagrad 2, it's a game, admittedly, didn't know much about before setting this up and looking into. It's sequel to Teslagrad that I knew came out a decade ago at this point.
First game we did.
First game the entire studio did?
Yeah.
Wow. And so now you guys have grown. So for those who might have been like me, what is the story, or what is Teslagrad to kind of hook people?
Well, it's a puzzle platform game about magnets. That's sort of the low level or the top sort of description of it, I guess. But we have added a lot of things to the actual story since the original. So like the first game focused very heavily on puzzle solving with magnets. We decided to focus slightly differently for this second installment. So we have more of more focus on traversal, still sort of puzzles, but traversal puzzles, like moving through the world and like doing more platforming focus than the original did. Like the storyline also centers. So if like you go over to more like the plot, in the original we had like there's this little boy who's discovers his family legacy, basically, and discovers that his family has been wronged by an evil king, and he sets out to sort of defeat the evil king. And in the sequel, we sort of shift the generation and to his daughter, and she's adventuring in the far north, and she finds another magnetic tower, which was sort of the focal point of the first game, and she has to she encounters like our versions of Vikings, sky Vikings in this case, and like magnetic sorcerers and monsters and stuff.
With Teslagrad 2 specifically, when you and the team, you guys, the original launched, you got it out, you've made other games. Yep. In the meantime, but what drew you back to making a sequel? Was it always something you wanted to do? Was it something that kind of just came out of the blue after a while?
I guess you could say a little bit of both. Like, I think some of us always wanted to make a sequel, but it wasn't like everyone was intent on it from the beginning. But we all were really proud of the original, and we still feel like that's probably, of the other games we made, that's probably the best one. So I think as time went on, we all wanted to go back to it, and we had a lot of much better ideas for the game now than we did when we just released the first one.
Yeah,
we were sort of burned out on the concept a little bit back then. But I guess you could have argued that we could have made it a little bit sooner, but we have had a tendency to spend a long time on each game that we worked on. So yeah, we basically spent 3 years on every game. So this is the fourth game that the studio makes.
So, I mean, you had Teslagrad as your first game, and then you had World to the West and Mesmer as 2 other titles. Were you able to take, as a team, things you learned, not just from the first Teslagrad, but from those other 2 games, to kind of implement into this? As far as what to do, what not to do, not just the art style, but just everything in general?
Yeah, actually, it's the way we've set it up is that they all share a universe. So like all the games are set in the same world, and they feature some of the same characters. So in that sense, we've taken a lot from the first game into the 2 next one and this one as well. But they don't sort of share mechanics. So I guess we haven't reused that much of the technology necessarily, some of it, but we have had to do a lot of the stuff from scratch for Teslagrad too. It's quite different, like technology from the first one and the other 2 games.
Is it a brand new? I'm assuming it's a new engine from the first one then.
No, it's Unity. So it's, but we have changed the tools quite a bit that we used to build it with.
Did you find, and maybe not you, maybe other members of the team, any difficulties in the fact of, I mean, granted, it is a game so long after the original. You're obviously new tools. Unity gets new updates constantly and things like that. Did you find any sort of major challenges in trying to get development going and design going? What were some of the biggest challenges throughout these last few years?
Actually, we did like we had to change how we built the world quite a bit, because we used like a tiling system to begin with. Like the first game was very sort of old school tiling, using like 4-directional square blocks and all that stuff, and we wanted to go more like organic, so have like curves, a Rayman Legend style.
Yeah,
like they have like landscapes and stuff basically, and you have those tools built into Unity, but we hadn't really taught ourselves how to use that before we started the project. So it was a challenge, like to figure out what tools could be used to do level design and what tools could be used to like do the visual side of things. And that we struggled quite a bit, especially during this last year, like because like a lot of the levels were built using tiles, but the tiling system didn't look good enough, so we had to sort of just plaster the spline shapes on top of it a lot of the time, and like there was sort of conflict between like the actual colliders of the level of geometry and the visual geometry.
What was like when you guys figured it out? What was that moment like, as far as, because usually, at least from my experience, there's a lot of things like in my day-to-day where you're struggling, you hit that wall, but then once you find it, it kind of sets in motion, just everything's just like, it's like once you reach the top of the hill on a bike and you just cruise down. Did you guys kind of have that moment at all, or did it just, or what was that process like, or what was it like when you guys finally got things in order?
Well, I think like, because this isn't my field personally, because I'm mostly responsible for anything moving, but like our main level artist, who's also the art director, he shout out to Ole, by the way, who did all of the like background visuals for most of the game. So he just powered through it basically. Like he changed out his own way of working, and he got it done. But he has been a real champion. He's been working so hard. Not that everyone hasn't been working hard, mind you, but like he's done an amazing job, because I think the game looks really, really good now.
And overall,
and I don't think there was like a moment, like
just
a particular moment. It was just like
happened.
He said, I'm just going to just do it, even if the tools aren't perfect. And then he figured out how to work around the problem, basically.
When you have a team member like that, though, does that kind of motivate the rest of you? Like, well, you see what one person's willing to push through, even if it's outside their comfort zone, they're struggling or whatever it may be. You see them get through it. Does that kind of motivate you to like, okay, well, I have this hiccup. If he can do it, I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it, type of thing?
To be fair, like there's more than one person like that in the company. I guess we kind of set up like we work. I mean, I don't know, maybe a lot of smaller studios are like this, but we work kind of autonomously. Like we have our own like area of responsibility, and we just try to make stuff work within that. But yeah, like it's definitely, we're pushing each other by seeing that like we can solve the problems, and we help each other when we can, of course. But like it's I don't know like specifically if his sort of engagement alone was what pushed the rest of us, but it certainly helped.
Moving on to, let's talk about the gameplay itself. So being a puzzle platformer, there's always these things where you have to find a way to stand out, because no one wants to play the same, no matter how good a game looks or the story. No one wants to play a game that feels like every other game they've played. When you guys were deciding what you wanted this to be, what Teslagrad 2 had to be as far as the puzzles, I know it still relies on the magnetic, but this time more and more environmental and physics and things like that. But was that always what you planned, or what was that process of deciding like how you wanted these new puzzles to work?
Yeah, I think we did some changes when we discovered the sliding was a lot of fun. So it was basically to begin with, we were thinking about doing, like in the first game we had this short range teleport, but it was correct kind of limited, but it was very fun to sort of do platforming with so it works like a dash, like a short range, but you can teleport through certain objects. And that was a lot of fun to play with. We wanted to expand that feature into something like with more facets, basically. And so that was the starting point. But then when you use the sprite shapes, we found out like physics, of course, you always get these sort of unintended things happening. So we discovered like sliding down hills was fun. So we just made it into a feature, and then we sort of started building on that feature a lot. And I think like that's the biggest surprise for me that I hadn't expected, I guess, that we would, because sometimes it can feel very like a very different type of game because of it's much faster than the original was. Imagine like a little bit like Sonic the Hedgehog, basically. While the original was a little more Mario.
So was that came in, like you said, after playing with the sliding. How much did these new ideas and these new mechanics kind of open the for lack of a better way to say it, the Pandora's box of puzzles for you guys? Did it kind of give you just like this never-ending idea, or were you guys still like, we have this silo we want to make sure we stay in and don't kind of vary too much from?
I think the philosophy from design has been that any feature has to interconnect well with the others. Like, so the sliding was fun because you could move it out from the sliding to like wall running and running on the ceiling with magnets into the sort of blinking, and then doing other styles of blinking that we added, where you can blink into water and become like an electric ball and fly through water. So like the movement mechanics, the ambition was like to get this sense of flow where you're like flowing through the level and utilizing different mechanics as you do so, but constantly in motion. And that so like anything that would sort of break that flow too much, I guess we sort of or like didn't contribute to it, were sort of gradually taken out. We have still some abilities in the game that are a little more, let's say you have to plan a little more, but most of them are like contributing to this sort of sense of constant movement. Because we were very we have a very active speedrunning community on the original game. And so we wanted to cater to that group because they're big fans. So like we have always, a lot of the levels are designed to have like a main path and like a speedrunner path.
Oh, that's
where
awesome.
They can sort of move a lot faster if they know how to play.
Did you take this? Added another question in my head. When you take the speedrunning idea, like you said, you have a speedrunning community. Did you take feedback from them on how to do things? Or guys?
Yeah, definitely. Like they have really, really detailed understanding of like character control, right? So, and also like they are incredible at finding bugs. So they definitely helped us a lot. Like especially like all the problems with sprite shapes and ending up inside of walls. Like the problem I mentioned earlier, where you we have both level geometry made out of sprite shapes and tiling blocks, basically, ended up causing a lot of bugs where you could just end up inside a wall, or like for some reason like get stuck on geometry, and speedrunners are good at finding those things. Like they use them for exploits, of course, but like yeah. So they definitely added a lot to the process to make sure that like the game is as solid as can be.
So when it comes to the game and Teslagrad 2, obviously certain things can be brought over, certain things can't. Whether it was for the story, the mechanics, or anything like that, were there elements that you weren't able to bring over, you tried to bring over, that just didn't fit?
Yeah, like there's a couple of things that didn't make the cut, basically, but not that many really. Like a couple of the smaller enemies, like we had a magnetic creature in the first game called the Iron Louse, which would be magnetized and used as a sort of weight to put on top of magnets to lower them, or used to pull things down, for example. But that sort of puzzle were pretty sort of slow-paced type of puzzle, and new game has a much faster pace of it to it, so that like those kinds of mechanics didn't feel like they fit as well. Like the main sort of weapon mechanic of the original, which was like the beam staff, which could use both to magnetize things at a distance and destroy enemies. Remove that to switch out with like different mechanics that felt more like they worked with the fast movement. So we have like a attack that you can do while you're in the air and striking down. Like, have you ever played Hollow Knight?
Yes.
Like the breaking downward strike, similar to that.
How has, with these new mechanics, I'm assuming you've had tests and play tests and things like that, how has the feedback been, to especially for those who have played the original compared to now?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty good. Like we have a not super big Discord, but like a few people hang out there and played the demo during the Steam Next Fest, where we let people play like a first early section of the game, and the feedback from that was pretty good. I think like they really enjoyed the fact that you could move like so fast. Like that really appealed to that group in our Discord. Of course, they skew towards the speedrunners, so it'd be interesting to see the feedback we get when we get it out to like a wider audience. Also, our publisher did a lot of testing for us, and the feedback from that group of testers was, I felt like that was maybe a little more mixed, but still pretty good. Like people especially like react positively to the art style very immediately, and they feel like the characters are likable, and they a lot of people mention the music as a highlight as well. So our musician was a local musician here in Bergen in Norway. He has made music for all our games. I'm really, really happy with his work. So
when you get feedback that is mixed at times, what goes through your head? What goes through everybody else's head? I mean, you can't speak for everybody else, but what goes through like in the office and like communications about like what is actually worth addressing, what's not, what you can kind of see as maybe potentially becoming a bigger issue versus this is just probably going to upset maybe one person?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell what like exactly what will become an issue, I think. I guess some things are obvious, but we try to listen to the feedback as much as we can. A lot of the time, like what gets fixed first is of course things that, like anything that locks or soft locks the game, like stops progression. Of course, like if anyone finds anything like that, that's fixed immediately. But like if it's about storytelling, if it's about the mood, if it like those kinds of things, it's much harder to know. Like, is our decision or our idea of communication wrong, or is it just this one person who misunderstood? And yeah, it's sometimes hard to tell, at least for me, like where exactly where to draw the line. Like, is it like an interpretation thing, or is it like an actual error? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I'm currently doing that now in one of the projects I'm working on. You got a couple people who are just like, well, we want it to work like this. Yeah, but the 30 other people here don't. So sorry, but it's just not, like we're still like in a constant daily back and forth that's going on like 6 months now.
There's definitely been disagreements in the team about how to solve things. That's also like on a daily basis, but we find usually a solution that we can be happy with. Like, that's how I feel, at least.
When you find those solutions, and obviously the game, it's set to launch in the near future, when do you come to that point where it's like, all right, let's make a decision now because we want to get this game, we want to get it out to people?
Yeah, when the money runs out.
That's a great reason. No argument. I'm 10 kidding. Out of 10 end it.
No, there's definitely like a budgeting thing. It's the way like we usually set up our budgets for 3 years, and so that's actually true. Like sometimes we just have to work until like we have to stop. But sometimes I guess like for the smaller details, how I prefer to work is I try to work on a lot of things and like try to lift the quality of those things to a certain level together, instead of like working here and then here and then here, so that like the end result feels even, right? Because then like I think unevenness is the thing that makes your game look the worst.
Because then you run into an issue. Well, the art's good, but the music is bad, or the gameplay is fun, but everything else,
or it's like the animation here looks good, but that looks trash. So I'm gonna remember the bad one.
Because that's what people focus on. I mean, that's just that's how the internet is. Thank you, everybody on the internet watching this. But I mean, that's just how you got that vocal minority that they'll stick to that negativity and harp on it. And that actually leads me into, how do you guys deal with like negative fan reaction? Do you immediately jump in to see why, or is it one of those cases of like you just talked about, it's hard to see what's legitimate and what's not, or what's justified, or like just what goes through your head when things like that come up? Because obviously nothing is perfect in this world.
I think it depends. Like sometimes it could be like, if people are giving feedback in good faith, and I think most people are, then you can easily engage for them. I think like sometimes of course people are just angry, but we've kind of been fortunate. I think like we've avoided people getting too angry at us. Like there was one time, but that was actually kind of funny. We did for World to the West, the second game we did, we decided to use updated version of Comic Sans as the writing font for all the dialogue.
I love it. I unironically use Comic Sans in work emails because I know it gets people upset, and I intentionally send emails in Comic Sans.
So it was a little bit of trolling for me and the art director. It was like, wouldn't it be funny if we use that? It was actually an updated version though. It's like called Comic Neue. And it actually doesn't look that bad. Like I'm my education and his education is like graphic design. So we were like drilled into our heads when we were students that you should never use Comic Sans, it's terrible. And we're like, yeah, let's use it. That'll be fun.
You can't tell us not to use it.
Exactly.
That's not how that works.
So we got into a big fight with a couple of people on Twitter because like that, you can't do that.
No, that's when you make a change and you go, all right, we won't use that. We'll use papyrus.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll go with that.
But that fight, like, but that was like, I felt that was sort of a good-natured fight. Like that was fun. And I don't think anyone had their feelings hurt. They were just harping on us because it was fun to do.
Oh, 100%. See, I am all for that type of troll job. If I load up a game and there's something like Comic Sans or some like mocking sort of voice style or something, I'm all for that type of stuff. Though I'm a very poke the bear type of person. So if I I see it's getting to somebody, I'm like, oh, if it's not gonna hurt them, if I see it's getting to somebody, like something like that, I'll just add fuel to that fire because it's fantastic.
Yeah. Our art director, Ole, that I mentioned earlier, he is also big, very, very into bad jokes on Twitter. So he has he does a lot of like bad puns. So if you enjoy those, then you can follow him on Twitter.
So I guess you'd say he's like paper because he's terrible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh my, that was a really bad one.
This is just what I do. This is my daily life at this point.
You two will get along, I'm sure.
Good. I need to have a talk with him. We could just do these puns back and forth and really just annoy everybody. A 2-hour stream of puns. There we go. The game, it's going to be Teslagrad 2. It's going to be available on Steam, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, PlayStation 4 and 5, and Nintendo Switch. How important was it to get everywhere? And as a follow-up to that, how difficult, because getting games onto every platform can be difficult. How much challenge did that present as well?
Well, actually, we've done it before ourselves. So this time was actually a little easier. My impression was like I don't do like tech side, so I didn't do. I guess our programmers will maybe tell you differently. But my impression was that like since we now have a publisher who helps us with quality assurance, that side of things weren't as much of a hassle as it was in the past. Though it certainly was a challenge. Like it was a lot of work. And a lot of back and forth because you know how like we have an intermediary step between us and the platform holders, so like at least not more challenging than it used to be, but maybe a little different challenging. Does that make sense?
How that makes me think when you bring up the publisher Modus Games, how your first game you guys published on your own. Now you actually have a publisher in your backing. How different does that make the process? Because I still think there's some people that don't really fully grasp what a publisher can bring to the table for a development studio.
Yeah, I think the main thing that we've noticed is the quality assurance thing and the testing, and having like more not set in stone, but more milestones that are set longer in advance, so that we are working towards deadlines more than we used to maybe, and that sort of forces us to sharpen our focus to get the next version out for the next round of testing, and I think that was a good thing for this project. Like the game is more solid than it would have been otherwise. That's my feeling. There's like, because our publisher is in the US, there are some challenges with the time zones, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an 8-hour time difference or 9. So like parts of the year, it's 9 hours time difference. So it's they get to work when we like when we have dinner, basically, or it feels like that.
We'll wrap this up with, do you have anything that you want to say to potential fans who are going to learn about this game the first time, like about getting them into the universe and getting them into Teslagrad 2?
Well, I think you won't regret trying it out. Like I'm really proud of the game. I think it plays well. It's fun. Like it looks really beautiful, and it has a interesting story with a lot of like very engaging characters. So I think if you are into like 2D platform games at all, and not just puzzle platformers, but like other style of platformers, like action platformers, I think you'll find something to like in the game.
Aslak, I want to thank you again for joining me here. It's been great to talk to you about Teslagrad 2. It comes out this spring again for all current platforms: PC, Switch, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5.
Thanks for having me.